arriving here into this new we space together here in this TAE class with each other. Bringing yourself into your room, into your chair, into this moment together here, feeling your feet on the ground, sensing the earth supporting you, feeling your back supported, sensing the space in front of you, behind you, above you, and below you. And really collecting yourself from your day, whatever is occupying you, noticing it, putting it to one side, really clearing the space for this TAE course we're about to embark on together. Just arriving into your body, just gently sensing what's there for you, how it feels to be me right now in this moment, and to be me right now together with this group.
Thank you so much, Shakafe. It really does bring us together. It seems like this exploration of thinking at the edge for clinicians is so needed and so important. I can't believe that I haven't gathered a group to do this together before this time. We're going to be entering into the world of language and the world of ideas. Language is sort of something that we take for granted, but language is so amazing, such a miracle, so complex, so rooted in the body. So we're going to be looking at language and language processes in a very new way here. And ideas, you know, sometimes it's even hard to say what an idea is, the world of ideas. Does anybody have something that you would say, you know, if somebody says, well, what is an idea? I notice everybody doesn't jump in with a quick at hand definition. And I always have to think about it anew every time I talk about ideas. For now, let's think about ideas. And we're going to come back to this subject because it's very essential to TAE. But we'll think about ideas as the thoughts that make something. All these little thoughts come together to make an idea. And let's keep it vague like that for ourselves, and then we'll come back to it. But that's what we're entering into, the world of language and the world of ideas. And we're going to be looking at thinking at the edge for therapy and in therapy. For therapy, I think it's so important that we have creative ways of thinking about the process that is such an incredibly complex and amazing process. Jean would call it the big therapy process, meaning that it has a sacred kind of trust about it, helping another human being to develop, to heal, to come into their own. And how do we think about that in a way that is rooted and also expansive? So we're going to be talking about that, and then talking about thinking at the edge in therapy, that when we're working with people, we are also we are also working with language and that connection between language and process and the moment and the interaction. And how do we use the ideas of TAE when we're working with people to get unstuck when we're stuck or to move the process forward? How central it is, really. The other reason that I'm so surprised that I haven't done this kind of a class before is that I live in a very split world. Many of you know that I'm a relational psychoanalyst as well as a focusing oriented therapist or a focusing oriented relational therapist. And some people, when I meet them at conferences, the people that aren't shy will say to me, "What? You're a psychoanalyst? You must be kidding. How do you put that together with focusing?" And or some people will even say, the other psychoanalysts here, I hope you aren't offended by this, but they'll say, "How can you stand it, the world of psychoanalysis?" Jim is smiling. And I think that split, also I should say that when I'm in psychoanalytic conferences and people ask me about my approach, and I say I'm a focusing oriented psychoanalyst, they'll say, "What? You're into that touchy-feely stuff? Really?" Or something like that. And the world of psychotherapy has been divided into the humanistic therapies and the psychoanalytic therapies. And then there's, of course, others like neuroscience and many other kinds of therapy that maybe wouldn't so easily fit into those two categories. But the psychoanalysts often think of the humanistic therapies as not rigorous, airy-fairy, touchy-feely, something like that. And sometimes the humanistic therapies think of the psychoanalytic therapies as pedantic, as rigid, as unfeeling, as unembodied, stiff. And so here I am, sort of like a mother and the daughter of a mother and father who don't who don't know how to relate well to each other.
Lynn, can I say something? I don't know if it's you want to take a comment now or not.
Sure, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that a lot of people who focusing and humanistic types are not caught up at all in what psychoanalysis has become in these decades at all. I mean, even starting from Kohut and then relational. And then, I mean, I know for me, reading The Myth of the Isolated Mind, the chapter by Stollerow absolutely changed my life.
Yeah.
And so I think that idea that there's a dichotomy is really archaic. And
yes,
people have to understand what
absolutely.
Psychoanalysis, even the difference between psychoanalysis and psychodynamic psychotherapy, where there's much more interaction and
right.
all of that. So I think that's important. When I talk to people not in the field, their idea of psychoanalysis is drive theory.
Yes,
Freud,
yes, thank
often.
you. That's absolutely true. And I'm speaking really not from, especially with COVID, I haven't been to any conferences, at least in person, for a while. But that is true that people are typecasting each other from many years ago. But the point that I want to make here is that that this division speaks to the larger division of the mind-body split that the psychoanalytic tradition has emphasized thinking and theory, and the intricacy of putting into words what people are about, what the therapy process does, and the therapy process long term, a whole therapy, whereas the body is more represented in the humanistic traditions, the feeling place, the body place. But Gendlin puts together in such a way that we can't really even understand how it was taken apart, sort of undoes Descartes' foundational, I think because I think therefore I am kind of statement, and shows us how thinking is a bodily process, and thinking and feeling are one system. And of course, contemporary humanistic therapists and contemporary psychoanalysts, contemporary everybody knows this, but maybe not in the way of a kind of practice that thinking at the edge is, and focusing is, a practice of mind-body unity. So I want to say that again so that my point isn't lost in all of my details. TAE is a practice of mind-body unity. TAE, as we do it together, undoes that mind-body split that is so destructive to everything in our societies and our therapies. So another way of saying what TAE is that it's thinking with the felt sense, thinking from the bodily felt sense. I would say thinking from the body, but then Gendlin is reinterpreting what body is. So it's not necessarily thinking from the pain that I have in my toe, but thinking from the sensuality of bodily experience, thinking into our feelings and feeling into our thinking. And thinking with the felt sense, thinking from the body, and then thinking from the felt sense. It sort of goes both ways. We can start with an idea, somebody else's idea. I mean, we're always starting from everybody else's ideas because we aren't isolated minds, right? Right, Liz? And I love that paper, and we'll share it with people. Thinking from an idea to how it hits me in my body, what it says to me, what it means to the person who said it, and what it means to me. That's an event. It starts a whole zigzag of events of thinking into the bodily experience, and then seeing what comes from that back into the thinking, back into that linear realm of language and words that come after each other. And then from that, back into the thinking, into the feeling. We can start also from something that we experience in our bodies and start there. What's there? I like to say to people, what's there for you now? That's sort of my way of inviting people to speak. What's there for you now? So then we start from what's right here, and then we put that into words, which goes into the thinking realm. We make an idea of it, or thought of it, and then we come back to, is that right? Did I say that thing? Gene in his talks would always say, you know, did I say that to them? And he would show people how he's, you know, consulting his body to see, did I say that to them? And maybe I'm doing that right now too. Did I really say that to them? How thinking at the edge is a practice of mind-body unity. And it makes our thinking completely different. And it carries forward our thinking, feeling process. The last thing I want to say right at the start is that thinking with the felt sense, thinking at the edge of our experience, is something that unleashes a very particular individuality, because we are the microcosms of the universe. You know, we have the whole universe in us, in our felt sense. We go way out to everything, past and future. And we are so individual from the very, very start, maybe even before we were born. We are a very particular manifestation of human experience, of life. And when we think from that place, there's something that is so exciting. It's a feeling of coming into your own, a feeling of coming into myself, a feeling of a kind of miracle that happens, like, wow, this thinking is bigger than me, and it's coming through me, and it's happening in me, and it's new, and it's very, very me. And it's not only me, it's an experience of that mystery that we are interaction, that our ideas are never new in the sense that they're new under the sun, and they're never not new, because I think that Olivia said this morning, our thinking is always an interaction of us and the universe and the other and all the other ideas. And that interaction is a very particular kind that's new. So I think those are the main things I want to say about. Well, I didn't say really enough. I didn't emphasize enough the joy of that process. And I want you to feel the joy of it. If you don't feel the joy of thinking at the edge, by the end of the module, you should take your money back, because the joy of it is sort of, the joy of it is kind of the, it's not the reward, it's the sign that this process is really happening in me. It just organically has a joy to it. It has a feeling of, wow, I just thought that. Or I always thought this, And then now I'm thinking that. It's a kind of amazing thing. Okay.
Question, Lynn.
Yeah, please.
Uh, why don't most people think this way?
Well, I think most people don't think this way because of this mind-body split. And the psychoanalysts like to blame Descartes. And since he isn't around to object, I always think he's getting a bad rap because I don't know if Descartes wasn't born, if we wouldn't still have the split. I'm not sure. But that's my easy answer. But we'll be seeing more why people don't and how we can help people do it and all that's involved in it as we go along. I want to just ground what we're going to be exploring in the person of Jean. As many of you know, Jean had a harrowing escape from the Nazis at the age of 10 or something like that with his mother and father. And the ways to escape from Austria were multiple, but very dangerous. And Jean watched his father navigating who to trust, who not to trust, what to try, what risk to take, what risk not to take. And he was awed by it. And he noticed how his father would say, no, I have a bad feeling about that. We're not going to do that. Or I have a good feeling about this person. We're going to listen to them. And Jean, as a little boy, thought, what kind of feeling is this that can tell us what to do? And that began a lifelong pursuit of a very new kind of thinking, the kind of thinking that is relying on a particular kind of feeling that can tell you what to do. And then when Jean was in graduate school and they asked him what philosopher he wanted to specialize in, Jean said, well, it isn't a particular philosophy, but I want to know where those philosophers go to get their ideas. I want to know how they go to the edge of thinking where the ideas come from. I love those two quotes, and some of you may have heard me quote those two things from Jean before. But it frames our exploration together, that we're looking at the kind of feeling that tells you what to do and going to the edge of our awareness, where the new thoughts come. Okay, now I think I've said everything that I need to say to begin to introduce this. And let me give you a chance to take that in for a second and see, as I say, what's there for you after my saying all of that about TAE. We're not going to have a big discussion now, but we're going to see what's there and what you would love to know more, you know, maybe a sentence, what you're hoping to get from this class, something that struck you.
Lynn, I've just been thinking, this is Beth, about where making art relates to this, all kinds of art, because I've written a lot of poems and taught in an art school for many years, and I think I know that feeling when there's this joyful moment when something comes together in a way that's hard to express outside of the art itself.
Yes, yes, yes.
Mm.
Writing poems or writing creative writing is such an example that Jean uses often, because particularly that kind of art where you know that there's a word that's the right word, and you have to test it against your body, your feeling, and when you come up with the right word for that poem, there's this release, and it's, yes, that's the word I'm looking for, right? It's
Yes.
a wonderful example, because writing poetry or writing anything really requires TAE, so we can just write and know what TAE is because we're doing it. We have to do it for that.
Mhm.
I had something, Lynn. While you were speaking, something emerged, I guess is the right word, because I've read Gendlin from the perspective of focusing in how he talks about the importance of language. Somehow there was something missing there that I couldn't quite grasp. And now as you spoke, it was like I got a sense of it from a completely different perspective. I got a sense of just being an infant, and there was no language, and there was just experiencing, and then how language and symbolism started to interweave with my experience.
Mm,
And how intimately they're interwoven. But
yes.
before, the language was this just continuing present sense of being, experiencing bodily. So this has been quite wonderful. I feel like I've completed the course, not really, but.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, you got a real felt sense of language. I do want to say that we use the word language, and thinking at the edge is so much about words, right? It's about language as words, but language can be many other things beside words, right? Like the language of color that Beth was talking about. Infants have that. We are language in a way. Infants have their own language, of course. My cats have their very particular language. Each one of them has their own language, and they're very clear in what they say to me in the language, right? So language is much more than words, but what you're talking about of the particularity of words is so important. And in the Thinking at the Edge, the introduction to it, Jean brings in how philosophers lament language, like everything is caged in these words. There's some quote about how mankind can't live outside the house of language, and there is a sense of loss about it because so much is beyond words. But Jean is saying in that introduction to TAE and other places that words can go beyond words, that language isn't only a constriction and a cage, it also is a way that we experience further. And those of you who know more than one human language know how enriching it is. And I don't know more than one language, so I'm sort of so impressed with how people who speak more than one language, the ideas and the thinking and the feeling is so much richer, because there's all of this experiencing that happens as we bring what is unformed and implicit into words. And then those words become something new And then that brings something new in our experience. So words are very, very special, but not, of course, the only language. Anybody else?
Oh, I guess I'm just curious about the importance of the handle. It doesn't have to be a word.
That's right.
Right.
The
Okay.
handle doesn't have to be a word, but when you are focusing with a partner, or maybe even by yourself, or writing it down, you may put that image into a word for yourself as you're writing it. I have an image of blah, blah, blah. And yes, but the handle, thank you for bringing up handle, because we're going to be talking more about the importance of in thinking at the edge of terms that are special words that become a support for an idea system. And handles are how we call those words that are supports for the larger felt sense that we're explicating. And so the word handle and the word term are very similar. And we'll see how they function as we go along.
I'm interested in thinking at the edge and focusing, and how it can be used in psychotherapy. That's my particular interest, and I'm particularly interested in, we have this idea in so much therapy that the person comes in with a story, and that story is the history and the causal relationship, and a lot of traditional therapy is to fill out that story. I feel bad. Oh, it's because of my mother, it's because of this and that. I'm traumatized, which implies a history, a story. Whereas thinking at the edge, focusing seems to be the now, what's happening now. So I'm very interested in what you do with the story when you're doing psychotherapy. And do you just ignore the story, or is there a way that you integrate the story with the
Absolutely.
here and now?
Thank you, Liz. We'll be looking at the demo. Some of you have seen it, maybe even more than once, of Jean working with someone who has just undergone a terrible breakup, probably, but she doesn't tell us all the details. But it's so wonderful to see how Jean works with bringing the felt sense into a name. So there's a name, a term, and a handle. And she says the name, she keeps saying it's ripped out, and she touches her chest. And I'll send that to you all. The very short answer, and we'll come back to this, of course, is that the story is very important. The story is an expression of a something. And Jean would say, what's the feeling of all that? How is that now? Or picking up on some key word. I was struck by, it's ripped out. Wow. Can I feel that right now? So it's not dismissing the story. We are story. But it's connecting, and I'm glad you said this, because it's such an important point here. It's connecting the story to the felt sense, and TAE can help us to connect the story to the felt sense, so that we're feeling the story as a team, the therapist and client, together in the moment, in our bodies, or in our energy systems, some people would say. Okay, I want us to look at
Lynn?
Yes.
Lynn, I wonder if I could just say something in response to Glenn.
I'm so happy when people speak up and say, Lynn, I want to say something.
Well, it was in response to something what Gray was saying, and
Yes.
just my own felt sense when you first opened up, and then we centered, and I'm looking at all the faces. I had this image of a braid, and it just emerged. This visual. I don't know if I really felt it in my body. I just saw it, and then when people started talking, I had a sense of being in the braid. And then Gray talked about the interleaving, and I just had to comment on that because it just, I felt so connected to that, because here I was, a visual of a braid, and then feeling like somehow I'm in the fibers. So
Yes.
that was great. And when Greg talked about interleaving and all of the language she used, my braid kind of became much more of an intimate experience. So I just wanted to say that.
Did it become more of a bodily experience? I mean, this is where the word body can be kind of misinterpreted, that it was palpable for you when Gray was talking about that, and you wanted to say, it wanted to be said in you. You said, no, wait, I have to say this.
Yes, yeah, it's true.
Right?
I was in it. My body was in it.
Yes, your body, that is a body feeling, right? It's a body. I want to say this. I have something to say. And so I want to flag that. That's what we mean by thinking from the body. It's not a particular sensation, although we can find the sensation part of it, but it is an aliveness that we are, that is visceral.
It's true. I went from a kind of a distance of this visual of a braid to then being in it as Gray spoke, as people introduced themselves, and then when Gray spoke in particular. So that was, I don't know why I feel a little embarrassed to say it, but it felt so intimate. That's the other aspect of it. So.
That's the other aspect of the body, right? That when we're in it, then it does feel intimate and maybe even embarrassing, because and I think that you are creating a term for us that maybe we can use, that when you're thinking at the edge, you're in it. Okay, I'd like us to look at the first quote that I sent you, and I think Jim, you might have it there and share your screen with us. And I'd like somebody to read it for us.
I'm happy to read,
Great,
Olivia.
thank you. Thank you, Olivia.
Language is deeply rooted in the human body in a way that is not commonly understood. Language does not consist just of the words. The situations in which we find ourselves, the body, and the language form a single system together. Language is implicit in the human process of living. The words we need to say arrive directly from the body. I have a bodily sense of what I am about to say.
I'd like somebody else to read it, sort of like we were reading a meditation. And this is an experience of listening to the words with our body. This is an experience that we're having together of taking in Jean's words and seeing what the felt sense of it is for each of us. Listening with our bodies, not just listening to the rationality of it. Can we have another person read it? It's
I
nice to
can
have.
read.
Go ahead.
Okay. Language is deeply rooted in the human body in a way that is not commonly understood. Language does not consist just of words. The situations in which we find ourselves, the body, and the language form a single system together. Language is implicit in the human process of living. The words we need to say arrive directly from the body. I have a bodily sense of what I am about to say.
Thank you. Yes. Let's come back together again without the quote. And we're just going to read this one quote today, and you'll have the others that you could read in this kind of way on your own. What did that say to you?
I'll say something. I think we're wired for language, and the way a child learns language has to do with their physical experiences in the world, and that's how they begin to use language. And when you have a second language that you didn't learn as a child, it's wired very differently in your body, neurologically, I think.
Yes. Yes, yes.
What came for me was when I'm speaking and language isn't deeply rooted in my body.
Yes. You notice a difference when language is rooted and when language isn't rooted.
It also brings up for me the language of the physical body in your facial expressions and your tone of voice and the shape you make of your body as you speak.
Yes. One more comment?
What came to me was like, if there's no words, if there are no words being spoken, you know, like, then there's like bodily language and facial expressions and
Yes,
as a
language. Yes, yes.
I just have a thought, if I can say, that I think in order for language to be a bodily expression, it has to come with some kind of intentionality. I think you have to intend what you're saying. It can't just be tossed off in some way that, you know, doesn't connect with another person.
These comments are what Jean said, what it brought to you, the thoughts that it brought to you, that you could write these thoughts down and you would have something to say more about all of those things. I want to go back to the quote and read it again And I want this time for you to notice the language, the words that Gene is using, how he's using them, and what he is trying to say to you. We first are saying what it brought up in you that you're sort of furthering, going further. But now I want you to go back and see what he is saying. And so we're going to have a third person read this quote. Martin, what about you? Get you in here. Do you read that quote again?
Okay, if you don't mind my Swiss accent, I do that. Language is deeply rooted in the human body in a way that is not commonly understood. Language does not consist just of the words. The situations in which we find ourselves, the body, and the language form a single system together.
Okay, let's stop there. And let's just look at that. Language is deeply rooted. Notice that word in the body. In a way that isn't usually understood, he's saying. And it's not just the words. Language is also the situations in which we find ourselves. The body and the language are a single system. Let's come back together and just see if someone would like to say what Gene is trying to say to us there. What is the felt meaning of?
What I kind of get in the, sorry, did I cut you off?
No, go ahead. Let's take Gene's quote away for a minute so we can see each other. Go ahead, Jonathan.
The word that comes up is that there's a kind of imploring that I get from Gene in this passage that I kind of feel in a lot of his writing. It's like it is deeply rooted, and then there's like a not this and not this, like a pay attention here. This is not what you kind of think, and I can almost smell like a tiny bit of like frustration or something with like it's not, but that could be my own projection.
Uh-huh. Right. So the felt sense you get from Gene is really, folks, language is in the body. It's one system. It's in the body is one part. And what is the other part that he's saying?
The situation.
In the situation, yes. Yes. Anybody else want to say what he's trying to say to us? What he's imploring us? I like that, imploring. It does feel like that.
Yeah, I really like the sense. To me, it's like the words are not just like floating there. It's like part of our being. There's something we know it's right, it's satisfying when the words can come from that deep place that reflect on our beingness, reflect on the situations we are in, the body's process, the aliveness. When the words kind of spilled out in that way, there is some sense of rightness. And there could be words we use that doesn't come from that place, that will feel like floating, and the sense of kind of disembodied thinking, or somehow it doesn't really say what we mean. I felt like but then there are still right words or the language that's still deeply rooted there. It just not get touched. So those words just couldn't say what we really want to say. Yeah.
Actually, I think in this little bit, there are sort of two things. There's the felt sense language that he's saying. There's something amazing about felt sense language. And there's something he's saying about language in general. And I think here he's talking about our human condition. He hasn't gone on yet to say what we know he is going to say, Olivia, about the felt sense language. But here he's saying language, all language, including my cat's language, when my cat was demanding that I open the door and let him out of the room, is rooted in the body. And it's one system with the situation. It's not this kind of language or that kind of language, but language with a capital L is this bodily thing. And understanding it that way, that it isn't separate from our situation, is a very, very big thing to understand. So maybe I would say, Jean is saying, this would be my felt sense of it. Don't argue with words or think that words have a life of their own. Don't get caught up in the words. If your client says, I'm not depressed, I'm just too busy to get up and eat, don't argue with I'm not depressed. What is that word for that person? You know, what does depressed mean to that person? The situation, the bigger whole huge intricacy of living is being communicated in language, sometimes better and sometimes worse, right? Sometimes Olivia is saying sometimes it does it and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes somebody will say this whole great big thing and you say, what, where are they coming from? What do they mean? But all of that great big thing is rooted there. There's something that there's gold there that we can mine in whatever is said. We want to find how it's attached there, that it is. We can't help it. That's our human condition.
If I understand your point, Lynn, on your kind of addendum to what Olivia is kind of saying, it's like even if the person is speaking from that disembodied place, that is still all part of that whole situation.
Mm-hmm. And the disembodiment is part of the situation. So as a therapist, if somebody, you're saying, oh, I can't do focusing with this person because their number of whatever it is on the experiencing scale and they can't focus and they're, you know, that's beside the point. That is the situation. And the words are an expression of the situation of the body, whether they're to the point or not to the point, or whether they're focusing or not focusing. And then we can take in with our bodies, oh, that's the situation. Whatever that is that would keep the person from making the point or being the point or saying the thing is part of the situation. Maybe they've never been listened to before, and so they don't know how to put things, don't dare to put what they really say, feel into, I mean, so many things, right? But that's all part of the situation that we can feel in our bodies. I want to give you an example of this. I want to say a couple of words, and we have to do this briefly because I want to give us a chance to work with some of this in breakout rooms today. So I'm going to do this briefly with you. I'm going to say a couple of words, and let's hope they come to me, because Jean says, I have no control over, will the words come? I don't know. So we'll see if they do. What I want you to do is listen to the words with your body and see how your body responds to these words. And then I want you to add your own words to it. Defeated. Successful. God. Indifferent. Denial. Festive. Somebody else, just say a word that comes to you, and we're going to see what it does in our bodies. Any word that comes.
Friend.
Friend. Yes. Someone else.
Love.
Love.
Sticky.
Say it again.
Sticky.
Sticky. Sticky. Oh, yes.
Trust.
Trust.
Excitement.
Yoga first.
Okay, I said excitement.
Excitement. And what was the other one?
Sad.
Sad.
Hate.
What was it? Hate.
Hate.
Yes, hate. We'll have one more because we don't want to end on hate.
Dancing.
Dancing. Okay. Could you feel a body response to each word? What the words do?
It's remarkable. It's remarkable to me how quickly the word goes into my body. And whether it's positive or negative word, for me, it still felt good that my body could hear it. Something about that. Like I'm here. I'm present. Called me forth.
Yes, yes. Yes.
I had trouble shifting.
From one word to another word.
My experience of defeated kind of left me there for a while.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's sort of like in any attunement, that it's not your pace, so we're keeping up or something, and it's very natural that your body isn't going to shift, and that's true also in conversations, that a word or a few words that someone says will stay with you. Your body will be responding to that, and you then able to shift into the next thing or the next thing because you haven't fully metabolized that. Yes.
Had an interesting experience. The first couple of words you said, and it was more effective when you were speaking, Lynn, just because there was so much depth and time, space in between the words. It was easier to take them in. But the first two, there was like a kind of a subtle thing happening in my energetic system. And the words that came to mind were from the first language I ever spoke, which is Spanish. And then after that, I got the next word, there was an image, a picture, a very vivid picture. And then there was like an energetic response and a picture. So they started to vary in how they responded or how my system responded.
Yeah. Wonderful. You might play with this on your own, just to have the experience of what Jean is talking about, that language is rooted in the body. And these are the words that you didn't pick, many of them.
Lynn, can I just say something about that I wanted to say before?
Sure.
You know, there was something about the word rooted, and I know you emphasize that a lot, that felt very solid and unmoving, or like rooted. It's in one place. But I just, the later part of the paragraph really stood out to me, where he says language is implicit in the human process of living.
Yes.
Language is implicit in the human process of living. So yes, language is rooted in the body, but it is also implicit in the process of living. And so that felt really important, in addition to the rootedness.
Right. Thank you, Shaka Faye. You know, from Jean's point of view, the body is the process of living. It's not a thing. And for you, the word rooted didn't have that process feeling to it, right? Because a tree, of course, is in process, and the rooting is a process, but we don't often associate rooted with process. So for you, if that were a poem, you might say, well, Jean, maybe you should use a different word than rooted there, because it's not conveying that the body is the process of living. The situation, the words, the body are all one system. Great. Well, you have Jean deeply rooted inside you, and so you can tell your inner Jean that maybe he should find a different word there. I just want to say, as we're gathering, that we'll be referring to this introduction to TAE as we go along. So we'll be referring back to it. I will be giving you other things to read, but we'll keep referring back to this. So if you haven't read it in an embodied way, go back to it and read it again, because it's such a succinct, articulated, very brief way of Jean saying what's so important to him about this process. So TAE is a way of us thinking together about therapy and about clinical ideas, and we're going to be doing that. And so it's a way of working with people and helping to get to bring the felt sense and what's trying to be communicated together. TAE is also what I would think of as a kind of focusing on ideas or focusing from ideas. And from Jean's point of view, and from my point of view also, and maybe many of your points of view, we each have a unique, very precious, irreplaceable point of view. And I like that because it's very much like you can picture a point of view. You're sitting at a particular point on a mountain or something, or wherever you are in front of your computer. And you are this point that is viewing, but it's from Jean's point of view, it's not just that you're the point and the view is out there. The view is in you and you are in the view, right? The view would be different if you weren't there. The whole thing, the whole world would be different. This whole class would be very different if each one of you weren't here. So it's an interaction of this point that you are and the view. But without you, something can't be articulated about the universe that is very, very important to articulate. And so we're going to have an experience of finding, I mean, it's infinite, the things that we have to say that would not be said without us, but we're going to dip into that a little bit together. So sit back. Stretch a little bit, get ready to. Yes, that's right. That's right. Yes, come back to yourself. Yes, knowing that when you come back to yourself, all of this is in it. All of the group is in you. All of the world is in you. It's a kind of coming home there to the you of you. I want to ask you, what is your relationship with thinking? Do you love to read things that make you think or see things that make you think? Are you sometimes intimidated by what people used to call the life of the mind, the thinking world, ideas like, oh, that's all up there, or I'm not a good thinker? Are you someone that thinks from your feeling, or someone that thinks from another person's thinking, like a book that you've read, or would you think starting from a situation, a personal issue, that then you wonder about the ideas that are involved in that issue? Just think for a minute, feel for a moment your relationship to thinking. Do you need more confidence in your thinking, in your ability to think for yourself with other people? Because we never think by ourselves. There is no separate, isolated mind, as Liz reminded us. And if something comes to you that you want to jot down in this attunement, please take that moment. Each of you knows many, many, many things about helping people. I want to see what comes to you now about something that you know about helping people. Maybe you never put it into words before, or maybe you always put it into words. Something that you know from your gut experience, from your lived experience. Maybe it's something you know that somebody else has articulated, like Jean or Stolaro or somebody. But think it in your own language. Maybe it's something that nobody else knows, or something that doesn't even make sense that comes to you. See if you can write a sentence, or if you don't have paper, because I didn't remember to tell you to get paper, maybe think it to yourself. A sentence about something you know about helping people. What's important about helping people, or how to help people, or how not to help people, or and just put that down in any way that it comes. Now, if something doesn't come there, something could get shy or intimidated by being asked what you know from that place. If something doesn't come, you could also put what you don't know about it. Something that you don't know about helping people. But if something came to you, don't go to the what you don't know. Only for if you got stuck there with what you know. I'm going to give you another minute. And of course, since we're focusing, if it comes in an image, write that down. And see if there's an example of that for you. An instance of it. And you might not have the whole thing, but you might just have, well, it's like what happened with my partner last week, or it's like what so-and-so said, or I knew that when I was 10, when something or other happened. And see if there's an instance or an example that comes to you about helping people. Notice also that the word helping people, what does that mean to you? what might mean very different things to different ones of you, what it means to help people. Some of you might not like those words. Some of you might love those words. Okay, when you're ready, let's come back together.
I would like to share something, Lynn.
Yes, go ahead, Nati.
Because something came as such joy. Because with these two questions that you asked, first, what is my relationship with thinking? And then the other one, something that I know about helping people. It was like they were so related, because my answer to my relationship with thinking was that I always thought from my feeling, and I always think with my feeling, and I have always been criticized because of that, because I took time and I needed space and time to be able to sense into what I had, into what I wanted to say, in order to think and sense it before saying it. And this was thought of, or many times criticized as, come on, say something. And I used to feel very bad at having to at feeling pressed and hurried, and then I realized, and I came into this realization, that something that I know about helping people is giving them the space, giving them the time, giving them the safe enough space to just be able to be with whatever they needed to be with, and say from that place, without being hurried, without being pressed, so this came as a wonderful realization that it had so much to do with my own experience. So
thank you so much. Thank you so much. And so what you know about people is that they need space. There's a wonderful book called A Time to Think that maybe Jim could put in the chat, and I'll send you a chapter from it about that.